Hi, my name is Professor Amanda Kennedy and I'm one of the academic staff here in the law school at QUT, and my teaching and research is broadly in the area of environmental and sustainability law. Today I'm here with Professor Achinthi Vithanage, and she's the Associate Director of Environmental Law Programs and Professor of Law for Designated Service in Environmental Law at the Elisabeth Haub School of Law at Pace University from New York. Professor Vithanage happens to be visiting us this week at QUT, and she spoke here earlier today on the evolution of the role of the lawyer in promoting environmental sustainability, our profession's role in innovation, regulation and responsibility. Through her work with the American Bar Association and others, Achinthi has been focused on how the role of lawyers is changing in a time of environmental crisis. So we heard earlier today how environmental sustainability is no longer the purview of environmental lawyers, and that all lawyers need to be on the front line of climate action, drawing upon that very unique skill set. So for those of you who are studying LLB 108, you've been learning about why sustainability is important and why leadership in this space is vital in the coming years. So in this short segment, we wanted to ask Achinthi to reflect on the work that she's been doing and to explain this in a little bit more detail for you. So Achinthi, first of all, from your experience, why do lawyers and law students need to know about sustainability issues and how to solve sustainability problems?
Thank you, Amanda. Well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. So in terms of why sustainability is so important right now for law students and of course for lawyers as well as they work in their profession, it's two things I would say. Firstly, there is a necessity in terms of our times and the context that we're in, right? We are in a time of incredible environmental crises. It's not new per se, we knew it was coming. It has only exacerbated over this time, but it is something that we just can't ignore anymore.
Yep.
And so as a result, that is one of the first reasons why I would say it is a time of necessity and context that we need to be looking at sustainability, and why law students need to be thinking about sustainability in every aspect of their work and life. The second reason I would say is simply because the nature of the profession is changing, and similar to what I spoke about during my presentation, the way that the legal profession is now approaching the issues of today and legal problems today need to consider sustainability. And that's not just because it's a moral or ethical duty as part of the profession, but it's actually being called on us by regulations that are coming out of governments, but also from the society, where reputational risk is on the line for companies. And so if we are now advising clients on how they should be interacting with engaging in their work, they now have to be thinking about sustainability. And it only makes sense that we also prepare our students to be able to jump into those roles where they can counsel their clients in a competent manner. And that means knowing about sustainability and why that is relevant to everyone today.
Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, and excellent. I know there'll be some students who will have access to the presentation you gave earlier where you definitely expanded on some of these issues, but just thinking about our own law societies here in Australia and the Law Council as well, what are some of the things that we've seen come out of these bodies that have shaped or influenced the way in which law is practiced or how we think about legal practice?
Absolutely. So you're very lucky, because Australia has come out with some really interesting things in just the last few years. And that's very much also responding to a momentum that's happening within the entire world on about the changing of the profession and what the needs of our profession to respond to this context. So some of the things are, in 2021, the Law Council of Australia came out with their own climate policy, which really reflects on the role of lawyers and how they should be responding to clients, thinking about risks, thinking about liabilities, thinking about opportunities of how they should address climate change in the way that they provide legal advice to their clients. And interestingly enough, the Law Council of Australia's climate policy also spoke to the ethics of lawyers in this respect and how that intersects with climate change. And I think that was actually quite amazing in terms of how they foresaw what was about to come, because in the coming years we saw, not just in Australia but around the world, various law society associations and organizations come out with specific guidance for practitioners on how they should be advising their clients, or even as they engage in any legal work that they do, how to incorporate climate change considerations into them. And so we saw something from earlier this year from the New South Wales Law Society, where they came out with practitioner guidance specifically on how lawyers should be advising in relation to climate risks.
So for those students who perhaps are unaware of these sorts of organisations like the Law Council or law societies, what is their role and influence in terms of the nature of legal practice? Why should students be thinking about what they have to say, for example? I mean, are we talking about something that's a law, or is it a little bit different to that?
This is a great point. So law societies tend to be a voluntary association, depending on the state. So for instance, in New South Wales, if you are going to join and become a solicitor, you need to become part of the law society. One of the benefits of law societies is also that they provide guidance on how lawyers should be, professionally acting in their roles. What are the rules of professional conduct are often set by law societies. In the American bar, for instance, they are also responsible for the quality of legal education as well. And so the accrediting of law schools and what is being taught is also set by law societies. So it really depends on the different organizations. So you kind of do need to have a little bit of a dive into each society to see what their purview is. But in terms of what it ultimately comes down to is, it is advising and guiding the legal profession as it evolves over time. And of course, our profession has also not stayed stagnant, right? It has adapted to the various contexts that we've had to deal with. And so that is what, even though a lot of these points that I mentioned, so the resolutions or the policy statement, these are all non-binding, right? They're not requiring anyone necessarily to follow something, but it is building on professional conduct rules that are binding on solicitors, right? Because we are expected to meet a certain standard as part of our profession and in the way that we practice the law. And so we can be held accountable. Should we then be looking at these rules and these requirements of us in the context of climate change or so environmental sustainability?
It's a question of interpretation then.
Absolutely.
And influence in that regard.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in LLB 108, the students haven't really yet touched on this idea of what we in, I guess, environmental law would call a wicked problem. And that's a term that we hear mentioned quite a bit. Can you tell us what you think that term means, this idea of a wicked problem, and why that means we might have to think a little bit differently about not only how we practice environmental law or sustainability law, but how we have to practice law differently?
So the answer to what is a wicked problem is probably a wicked answer too, because there is not one necessarily. It's very hard to identify. There are problems in society that we have, whether it's dealing with the environment or dealing with social and economic issues, where the solution is so daunting that, or it's intersecting with so many other things that it's incredibly hard to find a solution to it. And hence why I think these are the types of problems that are called wicked problems. And I think if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, many of those are wicked problems, right? It's not just, addressing environmental pollution, but it's also things like poverty and hunger and gender equality issues. There are so many things that are impacting the problem itself that it makes it wicked and it makes it difficult to come up with a solution, let alone if there is a solution. I think that's also a question sometimes people say is we're not even sure that there are solutions to some of these problems. But I think one of the things I've heard is that a good definition of a wicked problem is that it's something that you can't really define. Yes,
So
absolutely.
they're wicked not only in their solution, but in the actual definition of the problem itself. Yeah.
But you can imagine that because of it being a wicked problem in that sense, it also leaves you in a space where you don't know how to tackle it. And it can also be something that leaves you jaded or not wanting to tackle it because it seems so big or it seems so difficult that it doesn't give you much hope in that sense. But I think that's something that we need to be thinking differently about, and that's where the solutions come into play, and why, you know, having sustainability embedded in the curriculum that you all are doing so well at QUT, having that kind of perspective of when you approach a problem that is so wicked that it has to have so many dimensions to it, to come at it with a very open mindset, that there is not going to be one set solution for anything, that a solution must be evolving over time, that it changes with context, that it cannot stay stagnant. I think that's the kind of approach that we need to responding to wicked problems of today, like sustainability, like environmental crises, like biodiversity loss, like climate change, and so on.
And so how does that change the way in which we approach legal practice, for example, and even the training of lawyers?
So, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, because I know that when I went through law school, I don't think I was prepared to address the kind of problems that we are facing today. You know, we often in law kind of, you know, segment things so that it becomes manageable. And we kind of focus, it's just on this pollution and how we address that pollution level, reduce it to this standard, and that becomes much more manageable. But in reality, we're not addressing it on a holistic level, where it involves how folks are ingrained habits and beliefs that are actually bad habits that we've developed over time. And it's not even because it's either the context allowed for it and we just didn't address it. There is just so many other elements to it. And I feel that this is something that is sometimes missing in legal education, that we don't always think very holistically about it. And when we are now turning to legal education to become more holistic, that is not following through into practice. And part of that practice will require lawyers to be continuously retrained. I think that's part of it, because we have a lot of lawyers who are still stuck in a particular period of time that is not allowing them to kind of adapt. And there is a need to adapt right now. We just can't follow doing things the way that we have done in the past. And so trying to trying to help our students right now, as they're going through law school, to be very adaptable, very flexible in their ways, to think of solutions where they are meeting diverse perspectives, that they are building trust and confidence, that they're being compassionate in how they approach an issue, that it's not just we solve the pollution, but who cares what happens on the outside, even if there are externalities. That's not how it needs to be, because that's not going to be a long-term solution. So thinking about all of these things can lend to trust and confidence being built in our profession, that people will, when lawyers do provide, you know, laws, that there is trust by the community in that, because we've built a profession based on compassion and understanding and trying to address all of these things in a much more holistic manner. And so I think that that's where really the fact that you know, if we can expand the way that we teach law, that it is more humanistic in how we teach it, I think that can really, you know, make strides in how our practice eventually develops.
And catches up.
I
think you've just touched on some of these qualities, I suspect, in that response. But what do you think makes a good sustainability leader? What qualities do you think they need?
Well, thoughtfulness. I think you know, these are not things necessarily that we associate with lawyers. But I think these are things that we do need to be advising our students to be prepared for. So thoughtfulness about how, when you do propose solutions, that you are thinking very deeply and holistically about why that solution makes sense, what are the externalities, and how do you address those externalities. Being very compassionate in the application of the law. Being open to perspectives. And I think one of the other things about sustainability issues that we face today and wicked problems is there is no fast solution to any of these problems. And we are in a time, or at least in society, where we're so used to things happening fast, right? Whether it's instant communication or social media gratification, it's just things happen so quickly. And we also expect that our solutions to problems should also come just as quickly. And that's just not the case, and especially for things like wicked problems. So we need, you know, to be a sustainability leader, I think you have to have a long-term mindset, and that you are in it for the long haul, that it is something that you have to persevere, and it's something where you should also be willing to ask for help. It's not a one person thing, and that you know leadership also means bringing everyone along with you, and not just you going ahead and doing something on your own. It's about doing it with everyone and helping others see the light in some ways. So I think those are some really good qualities that if you can instill in yourself as you go out into the world as a student, that they will make you a really great sustainability leader.
Yeah. So again, coming back to law students and those that are thinking about legal practice, potentially not thinking of themselves as sustainability lawyers or environmental lawyers, what advice would you give them?
Well, the reality is too late, too bad. You are going to be a sustainability lawyer whether you like it or not. The way that the profession is evolving right now, whether you are a property lawyer, a commercial lawyer, a bankruptcy lawyer, a tax lawyer, a human rights lawyer, you are going to be confronted with sustainability issues. It might not be in the way that you think. And I think that's also part of the issue of how we do legal education. We're not being as holistic sometimes in where the intersections are between the different areas of law.
Yep.
So, if you are going to be going into the commercial field, you are now going to be expected by companies to be able to advise on environmental law issues, because environmental social governance is now a critical component of how a company operates. That's just going to be, if you're going to be working in property, you are going to have to be addressing how climate change risks are applying to, and you might not have thought that that's the case before, but guess what? That is how it's happening now, and you will be expected to. And you know what? If something goes wrong and you haven't advised your client about it, they could come back and sue you for not having advised them about these climate risks when you brought the property in a potential flood zone, right? And so these are things that you also need to be thinking about, how you protect yourself as a lawyer.
Yeah.
Right? When you go out, you need to be giving competent legal advice. That competency is now being expected to include sustainability considerations.
Yeah.
So, you can say that this is not where you're going to be working in, but too late. I mean, too bad. You're probably going to be working in it whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And so get on board is really what I would say.
Yeah. Okay, going back to students then who perhaps are inspired by this and think, actually, moving into sustainability is something I want to actively pursue. What advice would you give them as emerging lawyers?
Well, first, I would say find like-minded networks. I think that is a really good way to understand, for instance, where you can find sustainability work in the profession. We kind of come out of law school not always understanding the breadth of opportunities that are out there that practice sustainability. We think, it has to be ESG, or it has to be in going into government and working in that space. But in reality, there's a lot of breadth in the types of work that you can do to promote sustainability. And so my first suggestion is go talk to other practitioners who are doing sustainability and the way that they're doing it and how they're incorporating it in their work, because that will just open up your minds to the broad range of possibilities that are out there. And like I said, the law societies of different states, whether it's the national association like we have at the American Bar Association, but there are also sometimes just more localized versions as well. There are sometimes women's law associations that have environmental committees within them. Find out those different organizations and see where you really feel like you fit in, and you'll find your own network in that way. The second is that there are a lot of resources out there already that have been provided for young lawyers to kind of grapple with this situation themselves, because there's actually been a lot of attorneys who've gone through this process and not known, but had to kind of figure their way out. And they've provided resources to help other attorneys who are coming into the profession to find their own foothold in trying to promote sustainability. And so one of the books that I had mentioned in my presentation was Sustainability Essentials for Lawyers. And I think that is an excellent resource for both students and young lawyers to really see other ways in which that they can continue to work on including sustainability in their profession wherever they go into, wherever they end up working. Because chances are you might not get your dream job as soon as you come out of law school, and that's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
In reality, we really do need to be not preaching to the crowd, but actually working with organizations and associations that don't have sustainability focused folks within their organization. You have an opportunity as someone with that environmental law background, with that sustainability mindset, to then go in and try and change things from the inside. And where if you're finding that it's, can be draining too, because if you don't have folks that think the same way that you do, then working with you can be draining. But that's why those external organizations where you can find those like-minded folks can help you keep up that momentum. And so that's probably what I would recommend to law students, because that worked so well for me as a young lawyer. I joined my New South Wales Young Lawyers Organisation, and I was very involved in the National Law Committee and the Environmental Law Committee and the Animal Law Committee. And for me, that really stepped up my pro bono activity and led me to the kind of work that I've been doing now, because I see how much benefit there is in continuing to do that external. It's hard because it is additional work, but you have so much, if you have the passion for sustainability, it doesn't feel like work.
I think something I would add there too is embracing opportunities for work integrated learning while you're at university, and looking for experiences that you can undertake while you're a student, just to get just to see what's out there. And one I know that we do offer here at QUT is the opportunity for students to have a placement with the Environmental Defender's Office.
Oh, that's fantastic.
A fantastic opportunity to really get in there and see what happens very much on the front line. Achinthi, it's been wonderful catching up with you and hearing your presentation, which I hope the students of LLB 108 will have the ability to watch later on if they weren't in the audience today. And thank you for taking the time to answer these few questions.
Lovely. Well, thank you for having me again, Amanda. It's so nice to be here.
Thanks.